Welcome to Past Tense, a modern conversation podcast, where we take you on a journey of connection as we discuss issues and events related to the ancient and medieval worlds with our guest panelists. We end each Past Tense podcast by giving our guests the last word and the opportunity to answer the vital question, now, what do you know? We want each of you to answer the same question and say, I have just listened to the Past Tense, a Modern Conversation podcast, and this is what I know now.
Okay, welcome to another exciting episode of a modern podcast or modern conversation, this special podcast where we are exploring ideas of the ancient Roman Empire with our three special guests. We have Emily, Anastasia, and Jesse. So let's give them a second or two to introduce themselves. Emily, go ahead.
Hey, so I'm Emily Freeman. I am a major in biology, and I am the current expert on social structure and culture in the Roman society.
My name is Anastasia Karpenko, and I am majoring in business management. I'm from Ukraine, and I'm going to be an expert in religion and philosophy today.
I'm Jessie Lish. I'm majoring in construction management and architecture. I'm from Idaho, not far from here, and I'm going to talk about architecture and construction.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So, should we just take it away? Do we go with Emily first? With Jesse. There we go.
What are some of the core values that led to the Roman Empire's ascendancy, and how did it acquire those values? I've heard Rome compared to the United States many times. Are there some ideologies that cross over?
So the Romans were a highly organized society with distinct core values that governed how virtually every aspect of its empire functioned. So it was very patriarchal. So the male of the family would be the head of the family, and they would dictate much of how everything was run. So Roman values were deeply rooted in tradition. In fact, they even recognized their values as an informal code and named it Mos Maiorum, which translates to customs of the ancestors. The Romans favored tradition in contrast to new things, translated to res novae, which were viewed as a revolution against the ancestors that could lead to a disintegration of their society. So some of the main values of the Mos Maiorum were virtus, fides, pietas, disciplina, and dignitas. So I'll start with explaining virtus. So the Latin word virtus translates to manliness. Not only did virtus symbolize courage and bravery, but also the duty to be a contributing member of society and the ability to distinguish good from evil in the eyes of their society. I'll transition on to fides, which translates to the English word fidelity, or loyalty. Romans valued trustworthiness, credibility, or reliability. It was said that the Roman was only as much as their word. If they didn't keep their word, they weren't a contributing member of society. Go on now to disciplina and gravitas. So disciplina coincides with our modern idea of regiment, training, and self-control. Disciplina coincides with gravitas, which is the Roman's duty to protect his family and honor with reason and dignity. I'll transition on to dignitas, which also coincides with auctoritas. Someone who displayed all of these social values was said to possess dignitas. One who showed dignitas was granted auctoritas, or the authority to wield power over others in politics and other aspects. We can see many of these values upheld in current society. Especially in the United States, we believe that an individual can improve themselves and rise to the top through exercise of many of these values. So some of the things that we have in common with the Roman society is that they were a meritocratic society, so they believed that you were able to a certain extent, rise in society based on your own personal merits. And we can see that through our society and how we pursue education and are able to pursue our own interests.
So, walk me through how Rome's population was organized. Were Romans free to choose how they wanted to spend their lives, or were their social classes determined at birth?
Okay. So the entire structure of Rome was based on the family unit. You were either born into a wealthy aristocratic family and were a patrician, or a member of the society that was honestorious, or more honorable than being a common citizen or plebeian or humiliorous. So just to go down like the totem pole of power that was distributed in the Roman society. At the time of the empire, you have the emperor, which is the head of the Roman society and ruler of all of Rome. And they were able to have the final say on all of the decisions that were made by the Roman government. Then you have the patrician families, which were wealthy individual landowner families that were given a lot of power and had a lot of wealth in the Roman society. Then you have the senators, which served in Rome's Senate, and they're usually from a patrician family, and they were able to, they were part of the Comitia Senatoria, which was mostly like the ruling assembly. It was distributed in power between the other assemblies, but it had a lot of power in the Roman government. Then there were the equestrians, which were wealthy landowners that were associated with the military. Then there were the plebeians, which were the working class. So they're the kind of the artisans, the craftsmen, the blacksmith, and the potters. Then you had the freed slaves that were freed either by the decision of their masters for their exceptional labor, or they were to sometimes pay for their freedom. Then you have the slaves, which were the prisoners of war, and the people of people from the civilizations that they conquered.
Oh, sorry. How much power did the average Roman citizen have in determining the fate of their government?
So there's this thing called the Roman Demos, or the group of people that the governing citizens came from. It was usually limited to the city of Rome. So in order to participate in the voting process, you must live either in the city of Rome or close enough to the Forum, which was the social and political hub where the assemblies would meet in order to vote regularly. One of the major symbols of rising plebeian power was the plebeian council. This council was comprised exclusively of plebeians. It functioned as a legislative assembly. It was able to pass laws that were originally only meant for to govern plebeians, but as they gained power, their laws also had the effect on patricians as well. The council was able to elect representatives, known as tribunes, and try judicial cases. Where was Roman philosophy originated from?
The term philosophy signified primarily Greek philosophy in ancient Greek, because philosophy was created and developed in ancient Greece, and it arrived at Rome relatively late, where it met with significant oppositions. The progressive acceptance and application of Greek philosophical principles by Rome authors is a narrative of Roman philosophy.
What were some of the important themes of Roman philosophy?
The main two beliefs of Roman philosophy were
Epicureanism
and Stoicism. Epicureanism is a philosophy that preaches that pleasure is ultimate good, and that it is through pleasure that you may achieve tranquility and freedom from fear and physical pain. The philosophy was founded by Epicurus, and the main philosophical idea was in the public book that was by Lucretius on the nature of things. Stoicism is a philosophy that teaches that life is best lived in harmony with reason and based on knowledge, with complete indifference to pain and pleasure.
Then how did Roman philosophy differ from Greek philosophy?
Romans were intellectuals who were obsessed with the concepts of mathematics and while Greeks were the thinkers and philosophers. Romans believed that leading an ideal life and being a model citizens would make them gods in the afterlife, when Greeks believed that after death is when the underworld began.
What role do you think religion played in ancient Rome?
It was very important, and in ancient Rome, Roman religion was centered around gods and goddesses. The Romans believed that they controlled their lives, and the result was that they spent a lot of amount of time of worshiping them. Their religion was polytheistic, which meant that they believed in many gods and worshipped many goddesses as well as spirits.
How did Romans worship gods?
They involved cult worship, and approval from gods did not depend on person's behavior. It was more on accuracy of religious ritual. They all needed an image and an altar. They also, or the temple, which they offered prayers and sacrifices. The main gods of Roman culture were Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. Jupiter was the main god. He was the sky god who believed in all. He oversaw all the aspects of life. When Juno was his wife and a sister, who was she was resembled to the Greek goddesses Hera, who had a particular watchful eye over a woman. And there's Minerva, who was a goddess of wisdom, who was basically a Greek's goddess Athena, who was overwatching the wisdom of the Romans. Also, the presence of and influence of gods and goddesses were integral parts of life in the Roman state. The people of Rome built temples to their gods and observed rituals and festivals to honor and celebrate them. So, Jassy, explain a little more about the Roman temples and churches for us.
Okay, yeah, so Roman architecture, it took a lot of their cues from Greece, the temples especially. Their early temples were modeled much like the Greek temples to their gods, so they had columns surrounding the exterior, whether they were standalone or they were pilasters, and they had decorative scenes, the entablature. On the top above the columns, they had decorative scenes depicting how the gods interacted in their lives or wars they had won. And then in the middle of the temple was a single large room, which is where they would usually place the statue. They would make the sacrifices, the altars, stuff like that. So there are many, many great examples of Roman architecture, some specific to the gods, like the Temple of Jupiter Orbitus Maximus, others that were less specific, like the Pantheon. And then there were also churches that they had built, such as the original St. Peter's Basilica. So the St. Peter's Basilica was commissioned by Emperor Constantine, and it reflected other basilicas of the time rather than the traditional Greco-Roman temples. So it was built in the shape of a Latin cross. This one was more specific, was in the later Roman, and it was less specific to a certain god, and it was more, it became like a religious place for people. They traveled to Rome because of this temple, this church.
Okay, so Rome is credited with inventing a lot of things that we still use today. How has that affected the architecture and construction in our world?
So, nowadays we refer to ancient Rome as the concrete revolution. They were, like she said, they were very interested in math and science and engineering, and they basically invented the concrete that we use today. They used mixes that are very similar to the Portland cement base we use today, and some of it is stronger than what we create today because of the chemical reactions, hydration. They figured it out wonderfully. The Pantheon wouldn't have been able to be built without it. It's impossible without concrete because it was stronger and more stable than just stone blocks put together, but it was also heavy. So they used wooden scaffolding to get up there, and the ceiling, the dome, has coffers inside it, which are basically just like squares taken out of the dome, which was used for decorative, but it was also to lessen the weight of the concrete. They used vases basically as rebar to hold the concrete together better. And they were so like great at engineering that the coffers in the ceiling actually match the design of the floor too. It's crazy. In France. And also in France was the Nimes Amphitheater, which was modeled after the Roman Colosseum. But it is one of our best preserved amphitheaters today. It's in the top 20. It held about 24,000 people. The amphitheaters were used for spectacles. They used them for theaters, for plays, to kill animals in public, just to showcase manliness, basically. But it showcases all of the columns that were in all Roman architecture, and so it's just a great example of the Romans.
Okay, extreme, very fascinating. I appreciate your preparation. So I'll ask you the question and you can answer it however you want to. Now, what do you know and or appreciate about ancient Roman culture and civilization that you didn't know before? So just take a minute each, if you will, and answer that.
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, so what do you now know or appreciate about Roman culture and civilization that you didn't know before studying? Emily, go ahead.
So just related to their social structure, I like how they were able to have like a really organized social structure in comparison to all the ancient civilizations. I feel like everyone had like a role that was assigned to them, and even though they all had roles, there was a certain extent of ability to rise within your role and to improve yourself. And I just think that's a really cool kind of
You bet.
correlation.
Yeah, Jeff.
I really appreciate the ingenuity. I mean, they didn't have the modern technology we have now, but they invented so many things, not only concrete, but the aqueducts, and they had engineering skills way above, I think, what we do now.
Pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Great.
I believe that it's very interesting how Stoicism is that how you say it?
Stoicism
is still popular in modern days, and also how it's really fascinating to me how most Roman beliefs come from Greeks,
Mhm.
and that it was
Elevating?
Yeah, it would just get better with it, and wherever they believe, they would believe in their. Oh, sorry, my English.
No, it's perfect. No, you're great. Your English is way better than our Russian or whatever it is. Okay, so excellent. I really appreciate it. Okay, well, we're out of time, and we appreciate everyone joining us for another podcast conversation. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Past Tense, a Modern Conversation podcast. We hope you've learned something today about the ancient and medieval worlds by peering with us through various cultural windows. If you liked what we shared today, please make sure to share the podcast with others. Thanks to our guest and others who make this podcast possible. Please join us each semester for new, exciting episodes. Past Tense, a Modern Conversation, is a production of the Brigham Young University Department of Humanities and Philosophy.